How is it that we are Northern Ireland, how we came Northern Ireland, and why we finished in Newtownards. We are very much our family associated with Crepe weavers nearly from the beginning. Why we are in Northern Ireland is because of the very serious political problems in our country, Czech. We are Czechs originally, and we could not stay, and my father was put in jail because when the communists took over, all property was taken. So father, quite correctly, looking back, mind you, it scared me. I was just at college, grammar school, but at that time. But father quite correctly said we have to go. But by then the Iron Curtain had descended, the border was closed, so to get out, and I'm talking now about my parents and myself, we had to walk virtually over the border and carrying what we could with some help, friends, and found ourselves in Germany, and then they helped us into Belgium, where we stayed without any idea what our future will be. So I didn't mention my brother. Students could go out to study before the border was closed. So and they didn't want to go to universities. So father arranged that Zdenek, my brother, would go to learn more about textiles and the language, of course, and it happened to be Belfast. Now, I should have mentioned that when my grandfathers started the textiles, we were always in textiles. That was the other reason why we were in Newtownards, because of the textile connection. My grandfather started in, it was 1911. They didn't want to compete with the cotton, which was already quite large in the country, Czech country, and so they decided to go into flax, which of course is turned into linen. So there was some chance for them to prosper, which they did. After the First World War, they needed more yarn. My grandfather bought a little mill further near the mountains, and in a valley, because in the valley they considered there were several mills spinning flax for linen, and they considered the valley being more suitable because of the higher humidity. Father found that the best equipment for the spinning, to improve it, was made by Mackie's of Belfast. So that was the other connection with Belfast. My brother went to Belfast as a student. There was a certain connection already, a knowledge about Belfast. Belfast, of course, was considered a mecca of linen at that time. So anybody concerned with linen manufacture would know or would like to go to Belfast. So, as I said, we found ourselves, that my parents, myself, in Belgium. Now, my brother was in Belfast. We of course didn't, whilst the communists took over, he didn't go back. We knew a family called Socher, who were also from the Czech country, near where my grandfathers operated, and my father knew Mr. Socher from the time before the war. Mr. Socher actually was happened to be in in London when the Germans occupied Czechoslovakia, and so for a few months you were able to bring people out. So he brought his family out and settled in the UK and decided to live in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, and to start a printing business, because Sochers were very well known in our country as printers. Mr. Socher tried to be helpful. We couldn't get visas to get to UK. We were refugees without passports, and so it was a very difficult situation. It was known that Minister of Commerce in Belfast was looking for people to sort of invest and run new industries. Eventually, my father, speaking to the Minister of Commerce, got a promise of visas for us from Belgium to go to Belfast, provided father had to promise he would run a business employing people, but the exception was nothing to do with flax or linen, because they had so much of it. So as a result, we are moving from Belgium to Belfast. Now, back to Mr. Socher. He came at the beginning of the Second World War to Belfast, started a printing firm called Belfast Silk and Rayon in Waterford Street in Belfast. The rayon part of it was really artificial silk, which was developed by a firm called Cortos at the beginning of the 20th century. They came as Huguenots to England, knowing silk business, and but they were also good chemists, and they managed to produce an artificial fiber. The Socher was printing silk and rayon because during the Second World War the other fibers were short in supply. The governor approved certain fabrics, and some of them were made from the artificial fibers, rayon. Now, and one of the popular ones was called Crepe. Now, crepe fabric meant the artificial fiber was again, the warp was okay, but the weft was twisted, fairly highly twisted, like it used to be, you see, in the pure silk in the past, probably in France or wherever. The idea was crepe. After the crepe, the word is from French and means twisted, crepe yarn. Mr. Socher, after the war, was short of printed cloth. I suppose the Minister of Commerce offered him the two hangars, which should have been used or were used by Miles Aircraft before they went into liquidation. So they were empty, and Mr. Socher took them for this new process. There were 2 or 3 other weaving factories at the time here, Webb's and Mikkels and even Mayer's in the High Street. It was one of the last ones which I remember, and anyhow, so that meant that there was a bit of skill already in Newtownards for weaving. They started about 1949, and for the first couple of years was going very well because there was good demand after the war. We were allowed to come from Belgium to Belfast, and father was looking around and wondering what to do. Crepe had problems with lack of demand, and too much cloth was being made, and Mr. Socher couldn't sell it all. And my father came and put himself into the what you call inspection department, where cloth was being measured and inspected to make sure that the quality was correct. He was very much, my father was a very determined person, and very much on the floor, not sitting in the office. So anyhow, and this went on, but the financial situation became very difficult because the output wasn't big enough, and so Mr. Socher still owned the factory. So in about 1954, my father agreed with him about that. My brother was already in the factory, and I just happened to finish my degree at Queen's. I was just told, look after it. I was charged with development on fabrics and looking after the equipment, of course, and even looking, employing the personnel, the people. By the way, one of the councillors, I don't know whether he's still on the Arts Council, claimed that I gave him the first job. So anyhow, the firm was just surviving at the time because the production wasn't big enough. But fortunately, what happened, that a new fiber became available, and this time not the rayon, but synthetic fiber, which was developed by DuPont of United States. Everybody knows it under the name of nylon. It was used, nylon is a very fine fiber to start with. We call it 15 denier or 20 denier, and it was very popular for ladies' nylon stockings. So the first nylon used in this country, apart from some military maybe, was nylon stocking, because you got a lot of stockings out of a pound or kilogram of yarn. Our equipment was suitable to process the first nylon, and we got about 400 pounds per month to start with, very small, but we kept at it and used little fabrics, fine fabrics, which were used for embroidery. And with that, suddenly we started to, we could, the production could start developing and increasing. We bought even some from Manchester, remember, for about £20 each, which were being scrapped. And so we bought them and brought them here, and I helped to adapt them to weave nylon, and that really got us going. Other firms suddenly realized that nylon, up to then they were all in cotton or wool, or that nylon might be a good idea for the future to weave, so they were looking for equipment. I remember at the seminar, a gentleman said, oh, by the way, he was in Czech country, and there is a piece of cloth here, show me. He said, it's they claim it was woven on shuttleless, on water-jet looms. Now that's the first time I heard about water-jet looms. And now water-jet means without shuttles. Now instead of having a shuttle, you project the weft either with a jet of water or stream of air. But I mean, we were mainly interested in the water jets, because that nylon is very suitable. We want to weave nylon, so we were intrigued by this. By the way, the gentleman showed the fabric from the Czech looms, and to the seminar, he said, look, it's not the practical proposal, forget it, it will never work. And we were intrigued by this, and so we got 6 of them here. We were the first one in the world, apart from one little factory in the Czech country, to try this and introduce. It became the water jet weaving system. They brought them here. We put them on one of the old, I don't know if you remember, RAF. There were RAF huts, and worked at them for months, trying to apply local yarn and try to find who would outlets for fabric. The Czechs had no idea how to sell the what to make on the looms, or how to sell the fabric, or what to do with it. So we had to also find a dyer, finisher, because all woven fabrics usually have to be finished and dyed. So this was something new, because when you weave without shuttles, there is a fringe at the side instead of bound by the shuttle. And but we knew a dyer in England, and he had some experience in ribbons and trimming them with hot knives. So what they did, they just cut the edges off with hot knives, and that solved the problem. And in fact, the selvage used to be a terrible selvage, being the edge used to be either tight or slack, and but by trimming it, it became absolutely ideal. So really, the water jet looms were a brilliant idea, and as we started to develop more, bring more of them, because they, being without shuttles, needed a lot of energy to be sent back and forward, and that energy was saved. The water jet looms would go 2 or 3 times the speed of a conventional loom. So, and the noise was much less, because the clutter of the shuttles wasn't there. So really, the whole thing became much better for manufacturing and for the personnel, because they didn't have the noise, and there was no dust, and the speed. So in the old days, they looked after 6 looms in the old looms. Now they could look after maybe 20 or 30 looms to start with, because everything was going so well, and instead of having small bobbins, what the perns in the shuttle, they could have a big, which bobbins at the side, which lasted, and you could tie them on the next one. So maybe the loom might not stop the whole day. We had to, I remember even once or twice we had alarms, during the troubles, and we had to evacuate all the weavers out, everybody out, but we left the loom going. And they were still, they came back, they were all still production didn't have to stop. So really it was an ideal step, that the water jet, and we, as I say, we were the first, and for a long time nobody believed it would work. So we got several years start. There's something in Ireland, this water, but don't believe it. It doesn't really work, But it suited us because, so we started the expansion. And my father, at that time, already he became better known with the Minister of Commerce and his determination and how he managed to progress. So they awarded in an OPE by the Queen. The company got a silver mace presented to Arts Council, which is still there. He's now in Bangor. One of directors of Corto's wanted to buy the dyers, and they saw our cloth there, and they thought it's such a good idea that immediately they came to us and wanted to buy us out here. But I and the father sort of wondered, because after having such a bad time so many years, it would have been very acceptable. And I said, well, can't we go 50-50? Because Corto's were offering, you see, we couldn't expand. We didn't have the capital, and the bank wouldn't lend us money because we had no. So Corto said if they get sort of not 50 but 51%, they would tell the bank that they can lend us money, and that allowed us then to expand further by build the new buildings there. This was all right, but the trade was controlled so that the cheap countries couldn't kill the industry, like the textile industry in the other countries. So the trade was being controlled, but it was decided that it will be gradually, these controls will be reduced, or even so, which meant that the cheap producing countries could deliver fabric to other to the developed countries. You see, Corto started their own jet weaving factories and so forth, because they saw, and for quite a few years they even started to spin nylon yarn, and which we used some of it, and but with these controls, textile being slowly removed, they saw that eventually the business, the trade will be very difficult. So, and right enough, they couldn't sell their cloth. We were a bit better because we had we supplied a wider range from the beginning. We not only did linings or something simple, we tried to work and produce fabric for more technical uses. Even our production suffered because the output wasn't sold. Before we were, when things were doing well, we were exporting to the continent and North America, Canada, until, of course, these cheap countries started to, the Japanese copied the looms and started to selling these looms to China and other countries, and then the fabric was sold cheap to all these countries and flooded the market. So gradually our market had been reduced, and Corto's. So by 1982, Corto's decided to shut the textile plants, and we were in England and also in Northern Ireland here, and so we were in the same situation. We managed to reopen the company as a new company called Crepe. It was 1983 Limited, and to concentrate on the more specialized fabrics, which meant not being affected and so much by the import. We couldn't use all the all the area there. Not even the dye house was not being, we didn't use the dye house, but we opened the site to tenants, and we were very lucky. Quite a few people came, and most of the area was, in the end, the whole place was being used, if not by us, the 1983 limited by by the tenants, and we had the big spinners, the carpet spinners, the Regency spinners here, and all that went well into the 90s, when things became more and more difficult, when we were looking for some support. NIDA, or what they call themselves then, said, oh, we were not showing enough enterprise, we should be in China. We said, no, we don't want to go to China, we want to employ local people. Just before Cortos closed down, it could have been touching with the dye house, sort of 300 people. And they could have been 250 people at the end with the tenants, you understand, but our own was about 100 in the end. Talking about understanding, just one little joke. My father, when he took over, and he was in the inspection and watching the quality of the fabric, wasn't satisfied, so he would be giving people lectures about, what to do and the people would come to me after and say, could you tell us what he meant? Because, you see, I admire my parents because he was over 50 when he came, and my mother, but they were determined, and they taught, they learned the language, and so as I say, my father, he was very good in the end.